Madeleine. So I will be our de facto moderator for this channel. I'm just going to ask all of my colleagues up here to take a moment to introduce yourself, including where you're from and what you do. Speak up. Oh, sorry. Okay. Hi. Okay, I can go first. So I'm Allana, Nakashook-Zettler. My family is from Nunavut, born in Inuit. But then I've also lived all over Canada, from Newfoundland to BC to Ontario, and I did all of my high school in Allana. And right now I'm finishing up a degree in chemical engineering at Amautiit, and I'm really excited to see what lies ahead as I graduate.
My name is Jaiden. I'm from Northwest Territories. About a year ago, I started my digital marketing business. This means social media content creation, and I'm a bit more filmmaking and storytelling, telling the stories of the people.
Hi, I'm Schiller. My family is originally from Canada, but we moved down south to Montreal, so I grew up in Montreal. I'm finishing up my bachelor's degree in commerce with a major in finance. I've worked for the past year in venture capital, and over the last few years, I've been working with some small startups and a bit of a larger startup as well. And I'm really interested in that space overall.
That's all. Can you hear me better this? Did you will make my microphone? Okay. Mamiana. Yes, what about your future? Yeah. Jasmine Redfern Nunavut. My name is Jasmine Redfern. I am from Nunavut and currently living in Ottawa. I am a lawyer and policy advisor. I'm also the chair at the Nunavut Tribunal. I'm president of Amautiit, Nunavut, and the fourth division. You guys can hear me now? Okay, thank you. My apologies. I didn't think through the audio script today. What if I could do that? Sweeter and a question. Yeah. Can we do? Yeah. Main count.
Yeah, I just.
Dinner. Hi, while they're getting that can play. Never mind. Thank you.
Like.
How about that?
No. There?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. I appreciate everybody's patience. I know we're standing between you and lunch, but I had hoped that we could start a bit with you telling us about your respective journeys that led you to decide what you're doing now and your plans for where you'd like to be.
Okay, I could start us off again. So honestly, having moved my entire life has really shaped my journey and how I interact with the world. And so, learning everybody's stories and being so inspired and taking all these perspectives has really taught me the power of storytelling. And so Jaiden and I met earlier last year at a conference, and we actually undertook a project that hopefully will be developing, or we are developing, will hopefully be done by November, or at least start up by November. And it will be Indigenous Youth TED Talk platform. And so it will be a platform for Indigenous youth to share the stories of the different initiatives they've taken on. And honestly, I was just really inspired by all of their visions and their inspirations. Because, for example, one of the youth at this conference asked the government for funding for a sidewalk and streetlights on the highway going to their community, because he noticed that a lot of young women were going missing and being murdered on that route. And so then he helped make that change with the community, and it's really, really amazing to see that. And so through this is part of my journey. I hope to inspire other Indigenous youth and also network and connect together.
For me,
just about your journey, how you got to the career that you're currently on, and any hopes that you have, or a vision that you might have for the future in your career?
Yeah, so I think what made me start my journey was I always thought there's a lot of this digital media isn't very utilized in the North, especially in out people through networks. Then the flyers maybe more of just vendors, but it's like control the platforms that advertise. So back to that, just to kind of help it small businesses and not-for-profits if I'm going to get the message out. So now I've to kind of transition more into the storytelling and filmmaking aspect of it. I just tell the stories of the North from various
Yeah, so what led me to venture capital, and to where I am now, I think, is mostly just curiosity. I've always been interested in how things work, how we can even make things better. And so through that process and through just talking to different people within finance, I think venture capital was where I landed, because we get to learn about all these different business models, see how we could actually make the world a better place. Where one day we're looking at a frozen pizza company, and the next day we're looking at some AI project, which is super fascinating to me to learn how that all works. And eventually too, I'd like to do something more related to the Arctic and maybe within these fields, but unfortunately where I work right now, we didn't get very much exposure to that.
Yeah, similarly for myself, my career has largely been driven by a desire to bridge gaps and respond to needs or opportunities as I discover them or as they emerge. And I noticed that seems to be a bit of a theme for each of us, not only our own gaps, or just as we are exposed to new things that shapes our vision for where we want to go and what we want to do. Similar to Jaiden, I'm in the process of starting an initiative that attempts to respond to film opportunities in the North. We have, in the last year, we had a big Netflix deal for some Northern television series, and that involved flying up a lot of talent, a lot of equipment, and so we saw that opportunity and wanted to be able to train local talent to be able to do the film department skills, because we know we have a lot of various opportunities involving digital media, involving film, print media, and we need people to be able to produce that globally rather than just bringing people in right back. I'm curious about we understand that within this room, there's quite a few people that are interested in working with people in their various capacities. Maybe that's from the government, business, finance, or working with the Canadian Arctic. What do you think they should know or consider about youth perspectives and involve, or from your own perspective, in the work that they're doing in the lives? Well, or I could even start us off by just saying, earlier we were having a bit of a conversation about the role of mentorship in each of our respective careers. So does anyone want to expand on some of the points that we discussed amongst ourselves earlier?
I'll start off. Okay. I think, especially since the film industry is not very existent in my community, so I was fortunate enough to find a mentor in my community who was kind of in the media space, that came to cameras when to teach me how to do business and get into it. So I think that's really brilliant, that help build the capacities of these industries in these campaigns. I'm also an intern with RPT16, podcaster and more, interact with people and more. I think at first I'm really nervous. I'm actually a quiet person, and I didn't really want to keep hosting, but I think it would. now that now that I've done it, I kind of see value and the growth that I see to myself in doing it. So it was
For sure. So I can build off Jaiden's point. Me too, I consider myself quite a shy person. And so I feel like it's very important to actually show people how to do things. And again, take somebody under their wing and like show them the ropes almost, right? And it's the same with every industry, especially as young people, we're not going to know everything right out of the gate. So like these internship opportunities and these opportunities to actually try out different career paths. Like I tried out accounting before I lived from the Department of Defense as a summer intern one summer. And these opportunities really let me see what kind of career paths could possibly be out there for me and actually just build up my skills. Because even today, I use things that I learned over the course of all those internships, and I'm grateful for those opportunities that I was able to find.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just to build off of what Max was saying of like how important mentorship is and having those different opportunities is. So I went to high school in Yellowknife, and that's even a not remote place compared to a lot of the other places in Arctic, and I know that. But since coming down south for my university degree, I've noticed that how different the conversations are around careers and growth and economic development. For example, before I came down south, I had no idea what mentorship was. I wasn't in those conversations about how to build yourself and your career as a professional. And it was just almost accidental. I was at a conference because I got a scholarship where they talked about the importance of mentorship, how to get a mentor, how to actually go through that process. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize is like a learned skill and learned initiative. Especially for those in the north, because it's not as normalized necessarily. There is mentorship happening, but it's not called that, it's not pointed out as that. And I think something that's quite important is like if you maybe notice somebody from the north, you're like, I can take you under my wing and see let me initiate this and see if it's something you're interested in. Obviously, you don't have to take a kid and be like, I'm your mentor now, here's what's going on. But like just starting those conversations, I think can be really helpful because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, I think that that capacity building piece is huge. There's the exposure element in terms of ensuring that people are apprised of the various opportunities and potential career paths, the like informal and informal mentorship opportunities like internships, the less formal, just connecting with people who are in industries that people are potentially interested in. Really that capacity building and long-term investment in the human capacity across the North is really, I think, important. Are there any other elements that you see from the perspective of young people that are important for the economic development of the North?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think a conversation that we were having a lot here with different individuals was, do I ever see a picture going back up the earth, right, and ending up there? And so it's a little bit challenging for that fact. I would love to go back up, I would love to live there for now. But the issue is that the connectivity is really challenging up there, right? To have stable internet, stable communication down south. I don't think I would be able to do the job that I'm doing now up north. And this is a job that you can pretty much do anywhere, especially if you're online. You could take Zoom calls, you can have meetings, you can do your work online. But if you just have no connection, right? And if you said it's snowing in the village today, right? And that's a big challenge, right? So I feel like getting more of that infrastructure built up there would actually entice us. So yeah, just to try to go back and
I know you talked to us a little bit about the challenges that you've had with connectivity, how it influenced your way of relationship. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I work often, I am a lawyer, so my legal practice involves talking to stakeholders. in multiple different environments, and it's a challenge to try to explain to people, I'm sorry I can't join the meeting today because it's snowing, or the satellite's out, so you can call in and I can't call out. These things sound made up, and particularly when you're a young person or trying to establish yourself in a new field, these preposterous ideas that we have to factor into our planning and then try to build connections and relationships around can be really challenging, especially if someone's in Toronto and never experiences a network outage other than it can be really, really challenging. In terms of what Max is also saying in terms of the infrastructure investment, one of the things that I find really challenging is that we often don't have the long-term vision in our infrastructure investments. We tend to look at what the immediate needs are rather than that future forecasting and looking at what the long-term opportunities are and ensuring that we make investments that are ready for and responsive of those future opportunities rather than these short-term investments that over the long term end up increasing our costs because we're constantly acting as if this is a new investment rather than building something that projects that our population growth or adequately anticipates our population growth, our industry opportunities, emerging markets. It can feel demoralizing, especially, this is, for some of us, our second or third year participating in this and reiterating the same messages and then not necessarily seeing the same responses that we would have liked. It can be challenging.
Yeah, I can touch a little bit on that. I've learned, as a strong, maybe a little bit stubborn young person, I find myself often fighting a system, and it can be really demoralizing, as you're saying, because I'm reminding people again and again, we're people. We're not some made-up people of some faraway land, and we're not all going to agree on the same things. So that's my grandpa's going to like something different than your grandpa. My cousin might not like the same things I do. And so oftentimes, as Indigenous people and as Inuit, we're pegged into one fold, you. But it's not really that. It's we have so many different diverse perspectives and ideas, which should be heard about. And finding myself explaining this again and again, and I'll say it 1,000 more times because I'm really passionate about it. But being the one to have those conversations sometimes is really difficult and tough, and having to be wait a minute, maybe we should rethink this. Even as somebody who's just leaving university, I'm having these conversations with people who are many, many more years established than I am, and I'm grateful they're listening. But I think sometimes it's really beneficial to take a speed of learning yourself. Because also I've brought up the issues with people before, and I'm so this is an opportunity that maybe you can look out for, maybe look into. And they're okay, can you send me people that you're thinking I should talk to? And I'm okay. But then when that onus gets put back on me, and when I'm trying to educate a bunch of people, it gets tiring. So I think it's important just to realize the responsibilities sometimes that are put on youth to try and change the world.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to a couple of different pieces. One, that element of additional responsibility and the burden of continually being an advocate, in addition to just trying to be a human being and a business owner, a student, a family member, of continually being put in that position, either to advocate and sometimes often uncompensated, even if it's internal advocacy within your existing employer that doesn't It's not additional compensation. It doesn't take away from your pre-existing duties. It's added on top of it, and the pressure that can create. Is that something that other people have experienced as well? And then we've heard this idea of Northerners by necessity wearing a lot of hats and having to juggle competing roles. I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on how we can better support people to navigate having to juggle all of these competing professional responsibilities. Or is that something we're looking for other people to answer for us?
Yeah, well, if I could speak on that point, again, I don't know what the best solution would be in order to help out, but what I can say is that it does make Inuit Northerners better problem solvers, right? Better potential entrepreneurs, because they can be so creative with what they're thinking, right? So if we get the connectivity up north, fixed infrastructure, it lets them be more creative, right? If you can watch any YouTube video or find anything online that you're looking for, right? You can teach yourself how to do something, right? Rather than not knowing how to do it, or even just using, we spoke about it yesterday, AI, right? Ask ChatGPT how to fix something, right? If you need to. So I feel like bringing that opportunity to them could be great.
Hi.
Yeah. I know for me, because I've almost done my degree in chemical engineering, and there are so many opportunities in the north, especially in mining and metallurgy, even just other consulting roles. And I've talked with Mads this morning, and one barrier to me going back right now at my point, just graduating, is that I would be expected to wear a lot of hats. And I know the north capacity is so limited. And so I think the key to retaining and gaining professionals from that leave the communities to get educated in that stuff and to go back north is to make sure there's the proper working infrastructure, to make sure that as an intern, you're not being promoted 3 different levels within 2 years. So then just to make sure that you can still get the foundations that you can get best of. I know that's easier said than done, just because I know there's a lot of different factors that go into hiring in industry. But I definitely am interested in going back north, just after establishing myself a little bit first and knowing what I'm doing, so that I can be the best help that I can.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can expand a bit more on that, since 3 out of 4 of us are living outside of the Arctic at this moment in time. What would it take for us to be able to go back? I know, Max, you said you can't do your job without the digital infrastructure that we need. What about yourself, London?
So housing is a big issue. I have been offered a position before in Ecuador, and I think housing was one of the things that I would have to figure out on my own, and there is not really any housing. And so that's definitely a big factor. And also, this is probably something that's talked about a lot, but not necessarily considered a factor for moving back. Right, not the first one to come to mind, but I would say the cost of the flights, and how isolated from southern friends you end up being. Because it is a 3.5-hour flight from Ottawa. But if I want to be there and live there, and I want to tell my friends, be hey, come visit me, you just have to spend $3,000 to do it, without hotel, without food. And I think that is really isolating and always making some people from north come down south. And so I think that is one factor that would honestly help a lot. And also it would help me get up there now, when I'm still a student, and be able to make those connections with those people already there. And so I can see myself living there, experiencing it, making friends. So it kind of builds a sense of community, and make it a little bit more accessible. And what about for yourself?
Yeah, I think that piece about the cost of transportation back and forth is huge, especially as I'm transitioning into solo practice as an entrepreneur. the ability to factor it into my business costs traveling in and out of the north is really inaccessible for things like professional development opportunities, like participation here, where that falls to myself. That's not something I can bill to my clients. That's really challenging. And then the housing piece, I know for a lot of my peers, because housing in Nunavut is often tied to your employment. So as a attempt at addressing the housing shortage, a lot of employers offer housing, but that also means that people feel very vulnerable and afraid of even accepting positions that are then tied to housing, because now you've relocated your whole family to the north. What if that employment opportunity doesn't work out? Are you able to find alternative housing? Are you able to leave the community or move to another community? Our risk tolerance and management is so much more challenging just because of these limited resources and heightened costs associated with basic living. I'm wondering, Jaiden, what does that play out for you in a community of 800? What are some of the things that you would like to see in Northern Wellness?
Yeah, and one thing about especially young people in Northern Wales, like buying goods. Obviously, we have to fly out to out of province to get our education, and often lots of people go out to school. Like for myself, for example, if I were to leave for school for 4 years to get a degree, part of me wants to go back to the north, use my degree north, but not a lot of industries are in the north, so that can affect what kind of education you want to get. But I also did, during my running my business, I was also doing courses online, just better professional skills and just work with it. So it's difficult to try and manage running a business going to school. Especially with all my classes, they aren't very, they kind of make it seem like it's not full time. You don't get much support if you're encouraging schools.
I think that's a huge one, is the different policy treatment or the failure of policies that are intended to support young people or northern individuals to pursue opportunities, is that they don't keep up with the changing realities, like the fact that now you can study full-time online, but there aren't the same funding supports for things like that. We're getting to the end of our time here, so I'm wondering if it's okay if I move into our final kind of question. Okay. So there's a lot of changes, uncertainties, and opportunities. What are some of your own fears and hopes for Northern and Indigenous peoples being able to participate and influence their own reality in the future? I can start there.
And so, with challenge comes opportunity. They're inherently tied together. And so, since there is such a lack of infrastructure and development as of right now, which is a challenge, there's an opportunity to start and do things right. And honestly, that takes a lot of time and intentional effort to put into that, to make sure you build those relationships and intentionally are aware of your impact and what you're doing. For example, what Matt says, business goes as fast as trust does. And so if you establish yourself as a trustworthy business, reputation, or make sure your reputation is trustworthy, honestly, I think that's a key to success in the North. And there's a lot of talent and a lot of people willing to hop on your idea if that happens.
Well, I can share some of my own fears. I feel increasingly worried about us being left behind, particularly as industries integrate and adapt to things like artificial intelligence. Also, as our climate becomes increasingly, like our environmental climate becomes and political climate become increasingly unpredictable, I feel worried that we're not going to be able to keep up, that we're not going to be adequately prepared to respond to possible realities and outcomes, developments. And I agree, I think that there's opportunity here. I think I've heard quite a few people over the last couple of days really solidify that this is a groundswell as we're seeing new emerging realities. It puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that we are prepared and that we adapt, that we form our relationships even amongst sectors, amongst nations. So I agree, I think that there's opportunity and hope here. But I'm curious what fears or hopes do some of you guys have?
I feel like you touched upon too is the uncertainty aspect of it, right? We don't really know where it's going to go. Like you mentioned earlier, Amautiit, we've done this kind of for several years now, right? It's slow progress, and I hope that one day everything that we're talking about here, all the good, can materialize, right? And we create more housing, get it more connected, and make sure we're not behind.
For me, I'm thinking that what that here is the youth in our communities need to see that they can have a role in the North and in their own futures. I feel like these students are very good. Since joining or since becoming an officer anywhere, I find it amazing now. So many people don't even know about, or so many people at the community level don't know about all these broader things that are happening, like Northwest Passage, icebreakers, things like that, things that are happening in our territory that we are really big ahead of people. We have so many things to react against, or many methods so rare, so you love that, or political deflated. So I think it's kind of filled with this knowledge amongst the young people, and it's for someone to get and so they're getting themselves in spaces like this. So just kind of appreciating their results. Like the good
And does anyone have any closing thoughts before we turn over to some questions?
I'd like to say, I've been on this panel a couple of years now. And yeah, I think Ontario's is a great place. I think that thanks to Jessica and Lynn for inviting us here and giving us a voice to actually speak to us. Appreciate that.
Yeah. A big thing is I just want to say thank you. Thank you, all of you, for listening. Thank you, Jessica and Madeleine, for believing in us, putting us up here. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate those thanks and also thank all of you. I really appreciate that, we keep coming together. I really enjoy, I learn a lot from you guys every single time that we participate, and including the conversations that we have outside of this actual panel. I reference a lot of the industry-specific gaps and realities that each of you share with me, often in the policy discussions that I have. So thank you each so much. And I can't wait to listen to the podcast, Jaiden. I actually didn't know about that, so I'm going to check that out, and I hope you guys do too. So thank you.
Do we have any questions from the floor? One over here.
My thought before.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Aurélie from the European Union delegation. One of the EU program is for the youth in the Arctic to talk to each other between different countries of the Arctic. Is it something you think is is useful, important, or how do you weigh the relationship that you can have with young leaders in other countries of the Arctic? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's incredibly beneficial. I can only really speak to the Inuit experience, and I know that between Nunavut and Greenland, there's a lot of dialogue between young people, and it's really helpful for building off of one another's lessons learned and successes. There's often projects happening in one or the other where we're able to incorporate the success momentum and even share opportunities with one another. And it's been very meaningful for each of us. So I can only imagine that extending and broadening that network just increases the collective experience and opportunities. So yes, please, and thank you.
I'll ask that quickly. I know time's running out. But I think those conversations are really important. And even at, or I know anytime you get youth together, they talk. And honestly, that's so beneficial to helping get things done and inspiring people. Like at the conference I mentioned earlier, I had no clue any of these things that were happening if I wasn't there. And so learning and hearing what other people are doing is so inspiring.
And we just have a final question up here.
Thank you. It's more of a word of support than a question. I was you a mere nearly 40 years ago. And so I want to encourage you to keep your chins up, keep doing what you're doing. You will never escape the challenge of being overworked because you've already said yes, right? You continue to say yes to everything that's presented to you. That's not going to change. You know, at one time I sat on 20 different boards, committees, and councils and wasn't paid for it, but somebody had to do it. And if you're already saying yes to the challenges that you've been facing up to this point, then that is your path in life unless you somehow decide to change that. The challenges in your communities will always be there. I come from a town of 500. We have no road, no rail, right? No ports. Of course, I don't live by the ocean, so why would you have a port? But those challenges are going to be there. I think you need to take it upon yourself, like I did so many times, to not wait for the old timers to do the planning that you asked about. You're right, we do not do a good job of long-term planning, especially if we're reliant on federal or provincial state dollars to pay for those things. So you have to do the planning. Just in case some money comes available, you can have a shovel-ready project that you can present. Think about what you need over the next 40 or 50 years in your communities and start to put that down, start bringing people together and work on it. I want to say that you're not going to escape educating people. They're not going to come to you the way you would like them to. It is sort of, you already said yes, so you're in that role. I would say to embrace it because the world needs it. They need to be educated and they don't really know what they need education on. But you do. If you come from a rural community and you have those experiences and you've lived with trauma, trouble, lack of infrastructure, power going out, no phones, etc., it is you and your experiences that are going to be able to educate the southern world on what those things are, and then prepare yourself. It only gets busier from here.
Thank you very much for that. Anyone want to have a comment on that?
Sure. I mean, I would like to respond to that. I hear what you're saying. I appreciate and agree with you. And I would also offer that in terms of the planning, in some cases, in many cases, that planning exists. There's deficits in implementation. And as well for the education and advocacy, I agree. And I think that there needs to be adequate emphasis also placed on the responsibility of people who are operating and engaging within the Arctic to ensure that there's meaningful local impact of the work that they're doing and that they're maintaining respectful relationships, and that includes reciprocity. So that education needs to be bi-directional, and the effort and energy needs to be reciprocal.
Thank you very much for the questions. Thank you very much to all of our panelists as well. Please give them a huge hand. Thank you so much, you guys.